Welcome everybody out to podcast number 427. I am in Guadalajara, Mexico right now and about to do a Takt training at LCI Mexico. And so this is a perfect time to talk about some Takt planning topics and specifically why a 5-day Takt time can be problematic for you. So again, podcast number 427, stay with us.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome everybody out. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're about to have a great week, and I hope you enjoy this podcast as we head into the week. Now, if you don't spend a lot of time with Takt planning and you're wondering, should I stay listening to this podcast? The answer is yes. This applies to everyone. I really would like to invite everyone to stay listening since you've already started it and because it's a really good podcast that's crucial to what we need to be focused on in construction when it comes to Takt planning. So let me do a little intro here. So I'm standing in a hotel room. Effie's with me. Say hi, Effie.
Hi, Effie.
That's not what I meant. I meant to say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Anyway, so we're in, what's the hotel name, F?
Rio.
It's not Rio.
Rio?
Ryu, yeah. Okay, so we're in a really nice hotel in Guadalajara, Mexico. And we had a really nice flight today. Really wonderful people. So Elisa picked me up from the airport, came here to the hotel. We're getting everything ready, and we're going to be doing a course tomorrow, a workshop for some folks down here in Mexico. And I'm really excited about that. So figured that we would do this for 2 days, do it as a nice little gift, spread the information, spread it internationally. So that's where I am. I'm loving life. We just had a great dinner. We're in a beautiful hotel room looking out over the city. It's absolutely gorgeous. Really, this looks like, well, anyway, it's just beautiful. Anyway, so your 5-day Takt time is most likely problematic on your project and causing you difficulty, and I'll explain why. So forcing everything into a 5-day Takt time, just to be clear, isn't necessarily a bad practice, but it's not exactly how the Takt system works. So if people come up to you and say, which actually this doesn't happen very much, I would say the percentage is 75+% of people who have tried Takt planning in the past are raving fans and it's worked for them. And you can say about 25% or less are like, we tried that, it didn't work great. And I can tell you why it probably didn't work great for that 25%. When you hear that, it's most likely because they were using a 5-day Takt time. Now, let me provide some background here. In the last 17 years, well, maybe that's an exaggeration. The last 15 years as I've been using Takt time planning, Takt planning, I have used most of that time, and most of that time I've used a 5-day Takt time. And the weekends become what's called a systemic buffer. And that systemic buffer means it's a part of the system. It's a buffer that's a part of the system because Saturday and Sunday become, just by virtue of it being the weekend, as a part of the system, a buffer for the sequences and for your Takt wagons. Okay, so that's a systemic buffer. So if somebody works in a 5-day Takt time, you work those 5 days, and then Saturday and Sunday are buffer times, and you ask people to work Saturday if they're behind or if they don't get their work done. So it's a pretty natural thing. Now, I have used that most of my career with the rules that we package things into a 5-day Takt time, use the weekends as buffers. Now, like I'm going to show you here in just a minute, or talk to you about it just in a minute, that is problematic. And I'll explain why. But really quickly, let me just give you a caveat to that, and that is that when you are in your proposal phase, when you are in conceptual design, developing your schematic, whatever you call it, people, when I say those terms, people criticize me and they're like, why do we got to call it that? Well, dude, call it whatever you want. I'm just giving you a reference. Anyway, and partway through design development, I, most of the time, will use a 5-day takt time in what's called a macro level takt plan, in a macro level schedule format. And here's what I mean by that. Macro level is like the I don't know how many feet, but it's like the 50,000 feet, view. Then there's the norm level, which is like the 5,000 foot view, and then there's the micro level, which is the 50-foot view, right? I'm just giving you a reference, right? So, macro level is the high level of detail. The norm level is where you actually plan out the project day by day, and then the micro level, that's the work steps within each takt wagon and the work packages. So let me explain that a little bit. So the macro level takt planning format, when you look at our takt planning template on leantakt.com and on the website and on the YouTube videos, you will see that we're in a standard 5-day takt time scale, meaning every column is in a 5-day takt time. And that's because we find that if you plan a project in a 5-day takt time, it will build enough buffers into the system to where you will more accurately predict the needed overall project duration for the project. If you were in the norm level where you were doing it day by day, you would do just like CPM does, and you would undercut the overall duration. So instead of the 20 months that the project needed, you would probably show 18 and a half. But because we use the macro level takt planning templates on a 5-day takt time, and we lock the project into that rhythm, it usually builds enough buffers. We're talking like 5 to 15% of buffers to where you have the overall project duration that's needed to not start pushing and to not put the project into an eventual crash landing. Now, every time I've done this with the macro level schedules early on in design or in a proposal, it's worked. In fact, it's worked out to where you're within about 5%. 5% of what it actually took to finish that project. Now, how do we know that? So I've tracked actually over the course of about 10 years, the difference between, with multiple contractors, not all of them, but or even the majority of them, but with quite a few, the difference between what they could bid the project for and win it versus what it eventually took. And the difference is about 20% in Phoenix. Okay, 20%. That means that we promise projects 20% less than what it's actually going to take to build it. And I attribute most of that to the creation of CPM schedules that are undercutting the time and not showing realistic durations. So comparing against that, I've also compared the takt plans that were created early on and then compared them to how they actually finished, and it's within 5%. That means that 15% of that difference went away when we used the macro level takt planning schedule templates early on in pre-construction. So if you use that method, like I do, where you have a 5-day takt time and you block out Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you map your flow out in 5-day increments, you're going to end up with a project that has a more realistic overall project duration. Now, why is that important? Well, the reason that's important is because if you undercut your duration, if you don't have the right overall project duration targeted, your team will freak out, you will start to push, and once you start pushing, you will increase variation, manpower, materials, and start throwing costs at things, and you will extend the project duration. And it's very, very bad. And that's when you enter a crash landing. Okay. Now, so that's my one caveat. Now, when you are done with carving out the amount of time that project needs to have and the general conditions and the general requirements, the costs that go with that, and you make sure that people don't start targeting additional design concepts with that money, now you're set. Now you are ready to start going into the norm level scheduling. So my point with this is, if you don't create a schedule in a takt plan in a macro level with an accurate overall project duration, and you estimate that project with the general conditions and general requirements less than what's needed, then whatever that amount of money is, 150,000, 100,000, 250,000, half a million, million, 1.5, whatever it is, the designers will think that they have that money in the budget to go uh, to apply towards the building and towards the design. Or at a minimum, there won't be value engineering efforts to right size the design per the budget. So one of the most important things that we can do in the schematic design phase and early design development is make sure that we have those schedules and we have those monies allocated. We know exactly how long it's going to take to build that project. Okay. So once that's done, as soon as you're able to, then you start to plan your project in a norm level detail. And what I mean by that is that you on your Takt, if you go into our Takt plan format, instead of every week, every 5 days is a column. There, each column is a day. So on that Excel format, you can have a Takt time of 2, 3, 4, 7, 5, whatever it is. I really wouldn't recommend ever going above 5 or 7. I've heard of some people doing Takt times in other countries of like 10 or 12 or 15 or whatever. And it's like, that's crazy. That should never happen, right? Your minimum, there's really not a minimum. You can even have like every 20 minutes Takt time, but your maximum is probably going to be about a week. Okay. So you're going into this norm level schedule, and let me take you back through the process. So if you break up your building into Takt zones, you pull plan a representative Takt zone, and then you package that into a Takt sequence, and then you use that sequence to create a Takt train, and then you optimize the schedule. That means you use Little's law, which means Takt wagons plus Takt zones minus 1 multiplied by the Takt time equals the project duration, and you optimize the schedule to have the right number of Takt zones. You are going to pick up time and pick up buffers. But what's going to happen is if you started with a Takt time of 5 as your basis, you might end up with a Takt time of 4 for the project, or 3 or 2. And if you don't allow that to happen, you won't pick up the buffers. Does that make sense? So it's just like in CPM, you're going to have a project where you're literally just wasting time because you don't have the right Takt time and you don't have the right batch sizes. So my point is this: please don't lock yourself into a 5-day Takt time throughout the project. Be open to having other Takt times. Now, somebody might say, well, what about the weekend? Well, if you talk to Marco and Janos in Germany and a lot of other really good Takt planning experts, they'll tell you not having the weekend there as a systemic buffer usually doesn't matter. And usually the workers don't have any confusion about having it be at a 3-day or 4-day or 2-day versus a 5-day with a systemic buffer. So my point is this: if you have a project and you force and you're like, hey, we're always going to have a Takt time of 5 no matter what, then you won't optimize the schedule, you won't have the right number of Takt zones, and you won't have the right Takt time to gain those buffers. What if in your phase through optimization, you were able to gain back like 35 days of buffer time? Well, if you don't go get that 35 days of buffer time, you're just hurting yourself and you're wasting time. And that's why projects that use Takt planning and they don't know this can get into trouble and say, this system doesn't work. I tried Takt planning, it doesn't work. Okay. So the other thing that will give you problems is that when you hit a roadblock and you are in a 5-day Takt time framed within weeks, and you have a major roadblock, you can't interrupt the system and eat into those buffers as easily as you can if you were flexible outside of the parameters of that week. Here's what I mean by this. If you go into a 5-day Takt time and you're stuck between Monday and Saturday, and you have to fit within those weeks, in order for you to eat into buffers, you would have to delay the whole project an entire 5 days into the next week. But if you go on a 4-day Takt time or a 3-day Takt time, or basically get yourself out of the parameters of the Monday and the Saturday, if you hit an interruption, a rain day, a material shortage or whatever, you can move the whole sequence of the project 1 day or 2 days or 3 days and eat into those buffers and keep everybody on a rhythm without forcing everybody on top of each other. Okay. And so that's another reason why your 5-day tack time might be working against you and it might not be practical, is because when you get an interruption, you will probably want to interrupt the entire system and say, okay, I'm going to eat into one of my 35 buffer days. I'm going to eat into 2 of my 35 buffer days, 4 of my 35 buffer days. You can't do that if you're stuck within Monday and Saturday in the weeks, because you'd have to take up 5. Or what people do is they just go into another push scenario where they're like, no, just hurry up and finish. There was an interruption, but I still want you to get done. And then all the train cars, all the Takt wagons, all the box cars start to hit up against each other. And now you start to have a push scenario. And that's another reason why people say that tack planning doesn't work, for that 25% or less, is because they don't properly eat into their buffers because they've locked themselves in between Monday and Saturday. If you have any questions about this, let me know. But that is really the overview of why it might be problematic. Now, when I used to do the 5-day tack time, I would not over program or overpack my tacked wagons. Meaning, if I had box cars and a 5-day tack time, I would have them over only 80% full. So I was wasting time, sure, but they never got so congested and full that they entered into that push scenario like I was talking about. It was never, okay, I have a delay on a Tuesday, and now all of my work doesn't fit and it's eating into next week, but I'm still going to start the people next week on time. So I've got people working out a sequence on top of each other. That never happened to me because I didn't over program my box cars. I didn't over program my tack wagons. I didn't put too much work into a 5-day tack time cycle. The cycle time was like 4.5 days. That's why a 5-day tack time for 15 years never bothered me. But now we have people that are using 5-day tack times, locking it between Monday and Saturday, and they're overpacking the work that goes in there. And what's going to happen is if you have tack wagon A and if you have tack wagon B and they're overpacked and they're stuck between Monday and Saturday, what happens in tack wagon A when there's an interruption on Tuesday? Well, the work bleeds into the next week, and the superintendent keeps everybody starting on Monday, and now people are stacked on top of each other. Now it's no longer tack planning. Now it's push. Now it's a push system. Now it's chaotic. Now the system starts to break down. The system starts to decompose, and people will say tack planning fails, and basically you will descend into chaos. So here's what I would suggest. Everybody out there, please still use a 5-day tack time blocked within Monday and Saturday for your conceptual schedules, for schematic design, to make sure you have the overall project duration. But when you get into it, use the norm level schedule, which will enable you to use any number of zones and any number of tack times available to you, as long as they're not over 5. And that will allow you to optimize your schedule and gain buffers. It could be 10 days, it could be 35 days. You could gain maybe even 120 days of buffers because you are optimizing it with the right tack time and the right tack zones. Then once you have those buffers, and you have those buffers because you opened your mind up to the options of more or less tack zones and a different tack times, right? Once you have those buffers, you need to eat into those buffers. And the only way you're going to eat into those buffers a day at a time or 2 days or here or there, and move the entire tacked train, the entire tacked phase, the entire phase of work, you can shift it a day for a rain day or a delay or this or that or whatever. The only way you're going to shift and eat into those buffers day by day and not push tacked wagons on top of each other, not push workers on top of each other, not push trades on top of each other, is if you're able to shift that phase by a day or 2 days or 3 days and eat into those buffers. And you're not going to do that if you've locked yourself into a 5-day tack time between Monday and Saturday. And so your 5-day tack time could be problematic. And I can almost bet you that it is. And we can't afford to lock our minds in that direction and get stuck and hurt our progress. So if you have any questions about this, please let me know. We will also attempt to do videos about this. It's such an important concept. I want everybody to be successful. And I just want to say this controversial statement is that it's a 5-day tack time, like Hal Macomber said, is probably never going to be your ideal end result with your tack plan. It's almost never the case unless it just ends up being 5 days and you don't lock yourself into the weekends. So last thing I'll say, if you end up with a 4-day tack time with an optimized schedule with 35 extra days of buffers that you can eat into so your project team doesn't descend into chaos, there's nothing wrong if your work starts on a Tuesday and after 4 days, then it starts on a Monday and then it starts on a Thursday. And maybe you have a delay here and now it starts on a Wednesday. Workers are smart. The key thing is within each tack time scale, each tacked wagon, do you have standard work steps in there? And are you tracking those standard work steps to make sure you have optimized sequences and you go faster, more flow, faster, more flow, and you have repeatable work so you can actually implement the plan, do, check, act cycle? And these are the questions that I would like to ask. And I'll just close out by saying every project superintendent should have a tact plan. And each one of those tact plans should have tacked wagons with work packages and work steps identified. And every area or assistant superintendent should know within each of those tacked wagons or box cars how that sequence flows within that tack time scale for every tacked wagon, and should be helping the trades get faster and better with that standard sequence every week. And that is their job. And that is how you're going to make up time. That is how you're going to get as much consistency as you can with manufacturing. That is how you're going to move forward. And then everything else pulls to that tack time backbone. So you flow and then you pull. So I hope this has been helpful. Please open your mind up to a couple of things. Be open to different tack times other than 5. Don't lock yourself in between Monday and Saturday, and make sure that you're eating into buffers and you're willing to push the entire tact phase or project phase by 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whenever you hit a delay, so that you can keep everybody working in sequence and learn as you go in a flow. On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving